Hi, Pia.
Hey, Anna, how's it going?
I'm great. Sorry, just running around here before we all get started.
No
Hi,
worries.
Thomasine.
Hello, hello, hello. Same thing. I'm grabbing some water.
I know. I was like, oh, I gotta get my hot tea. And then,
Something.
Pia, after I say a few, like honestly, 30 seconds of hello
Sure.
and thanks, I'm then gonna just give you. I'm actually gonna have you be the host right away. Actually, even now. And then I think I'm just waiting for Liz is going to be co-host to helping out. So I just want to, and then I'll be silent. I'll literally pop. I'll be here, but I'll be popping out. Does that make sense? So that way it's
Sounds
not.
great. Yeah,
They'll
no
just
problem.
be.
Hi, Marcos. It's nice to meet you.
Hello there. It's a pleasure to meet you as well.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good for a Monday, you know.
Yeah. I was like, why is this a Monday? Oh yeah, that's right.
Hi, how's it going?
Hi.
Having a good Monday?
Yeah. How about you?
It's pretty decent for a Monday. I mean, it could always be better on a Monday, but it's not bad. There are worse. I've definitely had worse Mondays.
Hi, Marissa.
Hi, Anna. Good to
How-
see you.
I know. You know, one day when you're near campus, we should do a socially distanced hello. So I can.
I know. It's like I literally have only been there twice, but each time that I'm there, I'm like, she's so busy.
No, just text her. Let me know ahead of time. I'll make time. So, folks, just FYI, Marissa started her new position at Scripps, which is like adjacent to my campus, but during the pandemic. So, how do you know?
Yeah, so I haven't really interacted with anyone.
We should do a session on how you start how you start your job. Pandemic.
Right. During a pandemic.
I'm serious. That could be a session. Hi, Sunny.
Hi.
Hey.
All right, Pia, I am having you be the host. I know we have people now because we're
Got
getting
it. Welcome, folks. Thank you all for joining us. We're going to give folks a few more minutes. You're welcome to introduce yourselves in the chat.
Hi, everyone. I'm Marissa. Oh, wait, are we?
We'll get started in a few minutes. It's all good. I am on it. We will have so many co-hosts. All right, co-host has been assigned. Hi, folks. Welcome as you're joining us. We're going to get started in a few minutes. You're welcome to introduce yourselves in the chat and say hello. We do have a decent number of folks who signed up for this, so we know it takes a few minutes to transition from Zoom to Zoom. We'll get started shortly.
I know Tanatsin usually, mine lately has been the voting one, but I promised Ramin I would do, the Western Regional Conference.
That's good. That's good. You got to promote.
It's like, Anna. I'm like, I know. I work for Ramin right now, I feel like. Come on.
We've got Claremont Graduate University representing. We have some alums on this panel from CGU.
3 of us.
Yeah.
Anna, what hand sign did you just do?
3, number 3.
What's that mean?
Oh, there's 3 of us, you, me, and Pia.
Oh, I'm like,
Oh,
that is
yeah.
CGU. We're hand sign I don't know.
Oh no, I only do the anteater zot one. There's also 3. Well, I consider myself an anteater, so 3 anteaters on this group.
You are. Of course you're an anteater.
All right, we're going to get started in 1 minute. So we've got a lot of folks joining us. Again, continue to introduce yourselves in the chat. We're excited to get a really exciting conversation started with our panel this afternoon. We also invite folks to rename themselves to include their pronouns as well. All right, Anna, you want to get the party started?
Yes. So good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I think everyone's in afternoon in terms of looking at our region all the way from Hawaii through here. And well, maybe good morning to the ones in the parts of Asia, the Pacific Islands that we also have. I'm not really sure all the time zone difference. Thank you so much for joining this great panelists. I'm not going to be one of them. I'm just a regular attendee. My name is Anna Gonzalez, Vice President of Student Affairs, Dean of Students at Harvey Mudd College. And for this session, the Naspa Region 6 Regional Director. So just wanting to welcome all of you. Continue to encourage you all to participate in our Careers for Student Affairs Month events. We are making them all free and available, even if you are not a NASPA member. And so just wanted to say thank you all. Follow us on our social media. I leave it to Pia now to do all the rest of the introductions as well as the plugs for all NASPA Region 6 events. So just thank you, everyone. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you, Pia, for doing this.
Awesome. Thank you, Anna. So my name is Pia Bose. I'm the Dean of Students at Cal State Long Beach. And I also get to serve on our NASPA Region 6 board as a member at large for diversity and inclusion. I'm so excited to be serving as the moderator for this panel with exceptional folks in our profession sharing their expertise and wisdom with us. Before we get started, I do want to start with a land acknowledgement. I know that Region 6 covers a lot of lands that were the traditional homelands of a number of indigenous communities. I welcome you to take a moment to acknowledge the lands upon which you are joining us from. And I will share with you a little bit about the land from where I work and live. We recognize and acknowledge that the land California State University Long Beach is located on is part of the traditional homelands occupied by the Gabrielino and Tongva people, the Tongva Tom, and the shared origins of cultural knowledge and sacred teachings to the Ahachiman and Juaneño and many other Southern California Indian people. We also acknowledge the Gabrielino Tongva and Ahachiman Juaneño as the traditional custodians of the Los Angeles region, along with the Chumash to the north and west, the Tataviam and Cahuilla nations to the east. We actively maintain and protect the remaining undeveloped land base known as Pavogna, the gathering place, and recognize it as an active Tongva Ahachiman ceremonial site, a sacred space, a reburial site, the birthplace of a spiritual philosophy, and the place of emergence in the origin narratives. We respect and value the many ways that Tongva Ahachiman cultural heritage and beliefs continue to have significance to the land, to the living people, and remind us of the sacred and spiritual relationship that has always existed here at what we now call California State University, Long Beach. As we start this event, I hope that everyone can just take a moment to respect and to make note of the lands that we're upon. So some of the announcements we want to make before, as we get this event started, are Anna already spoke about Careers and Student Affairs Month. We've got a whole lineup of events this month. Please join us. They're all free. I think that one of the great things is that there's events for folks regardless of what point of their career they're at. Folks for the events for those who are new to this field, those who are mid-career, as well as those who are getting ready to retire. We've got it all covered, so we hope you join us. We also invite you to follow us on social media. We've got a great team of folks that keep everyone updated on both Instagram and Facebook. You can follow along. We invite you to engage. The Diversity and Inclusion Committee also, we've got all sorts of questions for the region that we'd really love to have you all respond to and engage with when we can't, in between the times that we have to meet. And last but not least, virtual Western Regional Conference is just around the corner. It's such an affordable conference and you get to attend while wearing shorts. Does it get better than that? So please take the time to check out the conference and get registered as soon as possible. There's a great group of presenters, speakers, and the lineup is looking great. So with that, we're going to get started with our panel. So first, I'm going to have our panelists introduce themselves. I'm going to invite you to share your name, where you work, what you do, your pronouns. And my first question for you is, why do you engage in JEDI work? I'm going to start with, who wants to go? Sunny, you can get started.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Pia and Anna, for this invitation. It's an honor to join this very esteemed panel. It's a great way to end my workday of meetings anyway. So my name is Sunny Lee, I she, her pronouns, and I'm currently the Assistant Vice Chancellor and Dean of Students at UC Berkeley. I've been at Cal for 9 years, the first 6 years in the Ombuds Office for Students and the last 3 in the Dean of Students office. And my primary role on campus is to be the student advocate, primary student advocate for our student populations, addressing student crises and student support. The areas that I directly support include the Career Center, Public Service Center, Student Conduct, Support and Management, which is our case management, Student Legal Services, and our Student Union. And did you have a question that you want me to answer? Are we going to wait until we all do introductions, Pia?
My first question is, as you're introducing yourself, why do you engage in JEDI work?
Okay, why do I engage in JEDI work? I love that, by the way, the JEDI acronym. So, for me, college, I did my undergraduate work at UC Irvine. It was an incredibly transformative experience. That's actually where I met Anna for the first time. I think that was your first professional job. You're not very much older than I am, but I was an undergraduate in the cross-cultural center, and she was a program advisor. And my time at UCI, taking Asian American Studies classes, being introduced to student life outside of the classroom experience was very transformative. And the freedom and the liberation that I started finding and finding my voice as undergraduate, that would never have happened had I not gotten involved as a student myself. And so I think how valuable those experiences were for me as a 1.5 generation Korean American immigrant and navigating, biculturally this place to me where I didn't always feel where I belonged, even though I grew up in Southern California. And so higher education is the place where I've chosen to make my impact, student affairs specifically. And this is the only profession that I've known for over 20 years now. And I see my primary role is to help students remove institutional barriers for everyone to thrive, not just survive. Public higher education is where I've decided to invest and commit my time and resources. And so UC Berkeley definitely keeps me on my toes.
Thank you, Sunny. And I didn't say this out loud. I just wanted to share real quick. JEDI, we're using the acronym JEDI, which stands for Justice, Education, Diversity, and Inclusion. All right. Sunny got us started. Is there somebody who would like to go next? I can call him. All right, go for it.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marissa Coe-Wheaton. I use she, her pronouns. I'm currently the Assistant Dean and Director of the Scripps College Communities of Resources and Empowerment. And it's essentially a space, it's like a student inclusion center. And I just arrived at Scripps not too long ago, like less than 2 months ago. Prior to that, I was working at USC in a racial equity center, and that's also where I worked on my PhD. And I would say that, you know, most of the reason why I work, why I focus my career on social justice is because for me, I was a community college student activist, and then when I also went to UC Irvine for undergrad, and I do, similar to Sunny, have to give a lot of credit to Anna for being such an incredible mentor during my undergraduate time. And you know, I was co-chair of the Black Student Union, and it was super transformative. And what I learned over my time throughout an undergraduate student, a master's student, as well as a PhD student, is that, you know, I'm a part of a very long legacy of people who have sacrificed a lot for me to be able to engage in higher education. And for me, it is an obligation that I take on with pride, and it is a responsibility that I take, and that I'm super excited to wake up and be able to have the privilege to do every single day. So many folks are unable to pursue their passion because of a lack of opportunity, because of the ways that they've experienced oppressive structures. And so for me, it is such a luxury to be able to wake up and work with people that I love, work with students, be able to deconstruct systems that have marginalized so many of the communities that I care about. And so that's why I do the work, because I owe it to my ancestors, to my elders, to folks who have really put their lives and their, you know, their comfort on the line for me to be able to sit here and just talk about my experience. So I'm just super grateful to do that. And that's what I feel really lucky that in my current role, I'm able to, you know, mentor and work closely alongside students who are really dedicated and, you know, sort of taking the baton and pushing institutions to do better.
Awesome. Thank you. Great to have you on our panel. All right, I'm going to call on Marcos. You're next.
Okay, perfect. Hello, everyone. My name is Marcos Guzman, he, him pronouns. I am the Assistant Dean of Students and Director of Fraternity and Sorority Programs here at the University of Arizona. A little bit about myself. I'm originally from New Mexico, from a mid-sized town called Las Cruces, just north of El Paso. I went to New Mexico State University there, where I had no idea I'd be doing JEDI work. I was in the hospitality industry, wanted to work in hotels and nightclubs and restaurants, and just did not have the passion. And so found my passion in student affairs. And shameless plug, if you're looking to go to grad school, Texas State University, that's where I had my transformative experience and being introduced to the JEDI work, to be honest. Those were the first times I was having real conversations about diversity and inclusion and equity. And so for me, I work with can be a very challenging population of students. You know, fraternity and sorority members don't always, I mean, you read the news, don't always make the best decisions. And so here at the U of A, we have a very large community with over 5,500 students. And with that, about 75% of them identify as white students, and a majority of them do come from very privileged backgrounds. And so I myself know that it's our office's work to not only do education around our normal, you know, hazing prevention and other things that are related to fraternity and sorority life, but really, really ensure that we have education around diversity and inclusion, because if there's any population that needs it the most, and then I'm the first one to really say that, you know, out loud is our students within fraternity and sorority life. So I really enjoy doing the work. That's why I engage with it, because I know it's impactful, and I know a lot of these students are wanting this type of work, and we know that our students need to be better and become more allies for the larger university, because our non-Greek students are very active in their role and doing their part. And so that's why I choose to engage in JEDI work, especially with fraternity and sorority members. But very grateful to be here. We have a star-studded cast here on panelists. I am like feeling a little like, hey, I need to set my game up here. Everyone's so awesome. So happy to be here.
Thanks for joining us this afternoon, Marcos. And last but definitely not least, Tanatsa, you're up.
Thank you, Pia. Good afternoon. Buenas tardes, everyone. Tonantzin Oseguera, ella, she, her pronouns, and I serve as the Vice President for Student Affairs at Cal State Fullerton. So I think along with everybody, I don't know that there's another way to do this work if it's not JEDI focused, right? I think, because of the communities that we represent, because it's also the right thing to do and it's the best way to approach this work. I think back, I'm like, I know I've had several awakenings and light bulbs go on over the years, even as in high school, as an undergrad. I came to the United States when I was 13 from Mexico, so very different experience than a lot of folks. And I was, formerly undocumented as well. But I think for me, that's the only way that I know how to do this work. Very passionate about it. And so it's good to have to be with all of you here today and have a good discussion about why this continues to be important and to make sure that we're pressing our universities to not just be tepid about diversity and equity and inclusion work, but that we really push and push and push.
Awesome. Thank you. So I just want to start by saying I'm so excited that we've got our panelists here and we've got a great audience here. It's nice to see some familiar names in our attendees. So this is going to be our format for the rest of our time together. I've got a couple of questions that I'll use to get us warmed up with our amazing panel here. They've got lots of experience and wisdom that they're excited to share with this group. And we've got an opportunity for all of you to ask questions as well. Because there's a lot going on in the chat, I'm going to specifically ask that folks use the Q&A section to ask a question of the panel. So we can keep the chat open for ongoing conversation. I'm just not going to be able to keep up with that as much. If you're welcome to ask a question of a specific panelist or for the whole panel, just let us know in the Q&A. So with that, my first question for the panel is, how does one influence transformative change regarding JEDI work in an institution? Can you give us an example of how you've done it and what role were you in at the time that you were able to do this? Do we have a volunteer to go first? I can start calling on people. All right, Tanatsa, since you went for the last question, you can go first this time.
I was actually thinking about it as you said that. I think you can do it at any role that you're in. You just have to be strategic, right? So I would say, just as an overall, is to be strategic, to get folks to collaborate with you. I think back to, actually, I was at, it was my first job at Chapman University, a recent grad from the University of Vermont, so go Catamounts. And I had just come back, and part of my job was service learning. And we had done service learning on campus in a way at the time that was really just about more what I would say community service, not really taking the time to learn about the communities that we were that we were doing work with, or why it was important, or why it was connected to any social issue. And I took time to understand it. First I listened to why it had been done that way, and I worked with some faculty members, right, to get them to see that there was a different way to do it. And they were, thankfully, they were on board. They saw that it really was, if we were going to get students to not just do community service one time, but it was an ongoing thing, and that it was really true to service learning, that we needed to expand that. So that, to me, was one of the ways that I felt like we can continue to make sure that students are connected to their communities, to social activism. So I really do think that you can do it. Again, being strategic, thoughtful about what moves, who you connect with, how you do it. And it isn't just coming in, at least in my experience, I'm an incrementalist. I admit that, and I like to evolve things. So for me, it's, if I can move the needle this little bit this year and this little bit this next year and this little bit, I know that then the arc of making that sustainable, not in the green kind of sustainable, although that's important too, but sustainable in terms of that it lands and sticks in the culture of the university, right? I don't want it to be after I leave that institution or after I'm gone or I move positions, that that isn't in effect anymore. And so for me, I have found it to be more effective when I do those incremental changes, but I anchor them in the culture of the institution. So that's one example. I have many more now as a as a vice president that I can actually push people to do some stuff in a very different way. But that was the first time that I think I ventured out in that.
Thank you. Marcos, I'm just going to go backwards from our last round. So
I was going to say if I could go next, because I just want to reemphasize the sustainability of the work. I think a lot of times when we think about whatever it is, if it's a program or such, coming with big ideas is always great, but how do you make it sustainable for long after you're gone from that position, or you have new staff that come in that inherit such a program? For us, we're in the beginning stages of our new JEDI work that we're doing here in our office. We have lots of ideas and we put them all down into paper, but we realize for our capacity as a staff and one still dealing with coronavirus and our own mental health, that we knew that we had to be intentional about what we were going to try to realistically accomplish this semester and then the next semester, and continue to build on those successes that we've had, and also assess where we're at, so that way we can better improve it. And I just want to share like one example that I think what we've seen so far as just even a small level of success is we instituted a virtual book club. I miss being in person, but I also love the outreach that virtual has had. It's so easy to connect right now with the students being on campus. Well, we're doing a virtual kind of modified, but they're here. And so we instituted a small virtual book club, and we had over 55 students sign up, and we sent every student a copy. And I have the book right here, so you want to talk about race. And perfect, look at that. And we've just organized weekly book club meetings where we assign the students, here, read the first 4 chapters, and then we just have a guided discussion with them. And I'm meeting with students that we typically would not meet with in leadership positions. We're just getting students that voluntarily said, I want to do this book club with you, and I want to read, and I want to become better. And every single one of the members of my book club were freshmen, which was just awesome. We're working with freshman students who just got out of high school and want to talk about this stuff. I wasn't in that mindset. And I think today's generation students want to talk about JEDI work more and more because they're watching the news. They're fully self-aware on social media of what's going on and the information that they're receiving. And we have to be there to help them process it, but make it sustainable. Don't worry about like the big long-term goal. It's going to get there, but you have to do the small increments to get there first.
that's awesome. Thank you. And we're doing the same, but we're doing it with our professional staff. We're doing the book club. It's a great book. All right. Mariska, you're up.
Yeah, these are such great examples that have been shared already. In the previous role that I was in, I had the privilege of like specifically working, like my role was primarily focused on working with faculty, administrators, and senior level administrators in HR departments to talk about faculty hiring, to talk about improving around equity teaching practices. And so, I was really lucky to be able to sort of provide direct feedback to HR departments and say, look, when we think about the hiring process, so much of this is just inherently biased. And not that we can avoid that because we are all biased, right? Like that's not something we can avoid, but we can strategically think about the ways that we can highlight the skill sets of folks who have been historically isolated from these spaces. So that was something that I was able to learn a lot of those unspoken and unwritten rules that take place in closed rooms where you're making hiring decisions. And I was able to kind of extract that. And I think now, especially as being a professional, a lot of what I focus on is thinking about who's not being considered at this moment. So, I'm lucky to be able to work directly with students, and that's where, 90% of my energy goes. But I'm also thinking about, how do I reach out to my colleagues, both faculty and administrators, particularly during times like this, where we're in a, heightened political moment, where people might be feeling a lot of, weight around the, blatantly racist, experiences that we're encountering. I think about, how can I support my colleagues? And so, right now we're sort of planning around, how do we support students after the election, no matter what the results are, how do we support students? But my question in those meetings is, how are we supporting administrators who are on the front lines? How are we supporting faculty who are having to host class the day after the election? How do we support them when they are coming from historically oppressed identities? How do we make sure that they have room and space and the grace to be able to process in the same ways that we do that for students? I think that that's really important, especially for me, having gone through, my undergraduate experience and my graduate experiences. I was, able to be the student, and I was able to be the priority for so long. And it really took my own experience to realize, oh, wait a minute, like, student affairs practitioners are people too. They also need support. They also have feelings and get overwhelmed during moments. And so I think for my role now, that has become a big part of what I think about is, yes, I'm programming for students, but how do I show solidarity? How do I just do a check-in with my colleagues who I know are working in mental health services, who are working, who are doing a lot of the on crisis stuff, working with students who, taking on a lot of that frontline labor. I just think that it's a small thing, but it makes a big impact when you feel like someone is thinking about you once you get on the other side of that professional role. So that's just one example.
Thank you. And yes, we are people. And we're also going through the emotions as all of this stuff is happening around us. Sunny, would love to hear your stories as well.
Just really appreciating what everyone has shared already. I think for a long time, I always thought you had to have a certain level of institutional power positionality to create true transformative change. But, when I reflect on my career thus far, I think about my time as a graduate student, as a master's degree student at the University of Maryland. And my second year, I had the opportunity to start a program, a new program on advising Asian American student leaders for the first time. And it was it's such a heart work for me, where I got to work with student leaders through empowerment programs, leadership development programs, their fight for Asian American studies. And now, I just had a chance to visit last year when I took a trip to DC, and it's a huge department now, and it's at that time when over 20 years ago, I think there was a Black cultural center, but in terms of space to talk about Latinx, Native American, or Asian American identities, it wasn't quite there yet. And so to know that I was part of something, or the start of something, or a really legacy of something that other people had started, I realized, Jonathan said this, I think whatever position that you hold at your time, the potential for transformative change is huge. And sometimes, you may not even see what the outcome or the fruit of your labor is until years and years later, and you can make more meaning and sense out of the work that you put in. And so I'm incredibly proud of my time there. I was able to work with a faculty member and some colleagues on a student development monograph for Asian American students. And at that time, it was because we were just trying to fill a gap. I identified a problem. We're trying to fill a gap in the scholarship and the literature, because there just wasn't any in terms of recognizing Asian American student identity development. And so I think, and I think folks who are prone to do JEDI work, we're good at that, right? We're identifying and able to deconstruct where are the areas that need our influence, and so that it can be more forward moving. And so, and I try to remember that on days that I'm incredibly frustrated, or because the needle hasn't moved, that this is a marathon, or even not even a marathon, because it doesn't end at 26 point whatever miles. It's lifetime work, and I'm part of a long generations legacy, and that I can do my best and give what I can during this moment in my history.
Awesome. Thank you, Sunny. So I just want to remind folks where everyone's able to ask questions through the Q&A feature, which is located at the bottom of the Zoom screen. This is a great opportunity to pick the brains and the experiences of these fabulous folks on our panel this afternoon. I'm going to keep us moving on to the next question. So Marcos, I'm going to ask you to start with this one. How does one create a space for allies or co-conspirators?
I love that word, co-conspirators. You have to invite them. I mean, you have to talk about the work that you're doing and know who is there out in your campus community to be a part of things. When we were developing our initiatives around DEI, we knew that we were not. We were educated around the topics, but we knew we were not the experts. And so we invited a lot of folks to give us a lot of feedback on a lot of the work that we were doing. And we leaned on a lot of other programs that were already existing to help amplify those as well. So you have to be vocal, you have to talk about it, you have to introduce yourself to folks that perhaps maybe you haven't met, and create that networking on campus to let people know that this is the JEDI work that I'm doing. You're also a JEDI, and we're combining forces, and we're meeting each other, and we're working together to be stronger for our campus. Because I think for a while, our office was trying to navigate it alone, and we weren't utilizing other folks around campus, and we weren't telling our story either as a department, because you want to tell your story to whoever will listen, because you never know who has the ear of perhaps your university president to talk about the work that you're doing. And so I think it all goes back to networking and inviting people into your space and talking about it.
Thank you. Tanatsan, would you like to share next?
Yep, I agree, Marcos. I think that is so true, that you need to find people that you normally don't talk to in terms of the co-conspirators or co-collaborators that you normally don't get to talk to, because those are the folks that I think make the greatest impact, will also have a voice. So often we are, I think, preaching to the choir, right? And we have those folks that we normally go to, and those are good folks to have, but it's also time that we start stretching ourselves and building those bridges with other folks that normally would not be interested or haven't been interested in the work before, but maybe are malleable, I think, to coming along and helping to do some of the work. I think that's very important, because that's actually how we make a difference and build a coalition of everyone on a campus. I think in terms of creating that space is trust, and it takes, to me at least, one conversation at a time, one person at a time, and it's exhausting, right? But it's part of the work to be able to connect with people on on a one-on-one basis. And yes, it's a little bit more challenging now, in a virtual format, but I think it's still there. And it's so important, because right now I feel it's easier to operate in silos. And so it's I think it's better to connect with folks and to be able to reach out and create those spaces and having those conversations and be able to figure out, how can you help us on this little piece? And even if it's just one aspect of whatever work that we're doing, I think that then creates more people to be able to come along. And it's tough, it's not easy.
Thank you. Absolutely. It's not easy. Marisko, let's hear your perspectives.
In addition to what my colleagues have already said, I think it's important to be a co-conspirator yourself. I think that is the way that you can role model that you're someone who is trustworthy, that you're someone who is going to, do the reciprocity, you know what I mean? And so I was lucky to be able to work with Anna as an undergrad and do coalition building as an undergrad and work across communities. And that really shaped the way that I did my work and continue to do my work. And so when I'm in a meeting and we're talking about a particular issue, I always make sure that I'm not just talking about issues that seemingly only affect me as a Black woman, at least what people can see, but that I'm talking about issues that are related to accessibility, issues related to the Latinx community, related to the APITA community. Even though I identify with that community, that's not what people see, right? And so I think that it's really important for me to always foreground that, so then people will then, take note and say, oh, okay, that's how we're doing things. Let me see what I can say, or let me see how I can show up for another community in response. So I think that it's just super important to build those bridges through your own initiative and taking the time to learn, taking the time to step up and say something, because we all know that when you are of that particular identity, people read it differently. And so when I talk about a Latinx issue, I know that sometimes, unfortunately, it's going to be heard a little clearer coming from me than my Latinx colleague, right? And so that's really key in terms of how I can show up and how we can exchange and create that practice across communities.
Thank you so much. That's, yeah, absolutely on point. And Sunny, let's hear your thoughts on this topic.
Wholeheartedly agree with what Marissa said about being a good co-conspirator yourself. And so, I think of practicing allyship, but I never call myself an ally because it's not up to me to define whether I've, earned up to being an ally. But I think for me, that helps to keep myself humble in terms of acknowledging all the growth spaces that I still have yet to fill, and trying to apply that grace to creating space for folks who I want to be my ally and my co-conspirator. And I have a, just a little story to share. I was in a meeting, it was in the police department. It was a threat assessment meeting, not very fun. And I was sitting next to our campus council, and we were just filling time, and we were talking about the latest books that we were reading. And he pulled out White Fragility. He's a white cis hetero-identified man, and he pulls out this book, and it's White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. This was a couple of years ago, and he was saying how he picked up this book and he was learning a lot. And I said, that would be, and he's like, I'm carrying extra copies in my book because I'm trying to, get other white folks to read it. I was like, that's incredible. I said, wouldn't it be amazing if the chancellor and her cabinet, which is predominantly white, and it's the senior most leadership team on our campus, I said, wouldn't it be great if the cabinet read that? And you all had a discussion about it. And he said, that would be a great idea. And I said, wouldn't it be great if the campus council suggested that to the cabinet? Because they listen to everything you have to say. And he said, and he thought, I'm going to try. And, it took him a few months to convince and get everybody on the same page. But he did it. And he reported back to me, just he's like, well, it happened. Like, they're all reading it. We're having, conversations. It sparked conversations in reading groups elsewhere at the university. And so, for me, and I do see him as a very important co-conspirator in this work together. And we're someone that we trust. Like, I can go to him to offer feedback, and vice versa, about how we're showing up in spaces, how we can support the work, the JEDI work together in our respective roles. So I think relationship building is key, offering grace that we're not always going to get it right. I'm not always going to get it right. I'm going to mess up and own when I mess up, and also have space when other people are going to mess up, because I know when I was younger, I didn't have a lot of space for that. I think for JEDI, J was for judging. I was very judgmental, and I still am, and I still own it. And that's the part of me that I continuously try to check that we're all connected, because when I judge others, it makes me separate. And we're going to go so much further together when I can suspend my judgment, and I accept people for where they're at, so we can take that next step forward together.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sunny. Your comment about allies makes me think of, one of the things I talk about is telling folks you're an ally is like telling folks that you're funny, right? Like, you don't tell people you're funny. You show them you're funny, right? By what you say and how you deliver things. With that being said, I'm hysterical. You should just know that now. So we've got some quotes or some questions coming in from our participants. So our first question is, given that many students are only on campus for 4-ish years and often want to see immediate change in response to JEDI issues, how do you show students that you're making incremental lasting change? I think that's an amazing question. Thank you so much. And I'm gonna start with Tanatsan on this one.
Since I was the one that mentioned it. No, it's good. Um, it is hard, but I think part of our job is also to help students understand that there are going to be some times where we can do some easy changes. And if there are, we should do them, right? I wouldn't say easy, but some that are like, okay, we can do that, right? And then there are times where it is going to it's a longer arc. And so it's part of our job also to explain why that is a longer arc and to invite them in to assist to make sure that it is rooted on the campus culture. So whether it's to change, in particular now, university police, that we have students, like our campus recently started a Chiefs Advisory Board. And so we have 2 student representatives on that board. And so it's important, right? Because some of the changes that will occur of how we work with our university police, how they work with the campus, some are gonna be quick. We're talking about them doing some different events and some different programs. So those, I think, students are gonna be able to see within, if they're a graduating senior, they're gonna be able to see some of them in the spring. But some won't happen until perhaps it's for a first-time student, they're not going to see them for another year or 2 because those are going to take much longer. But it's to help students understand and contextualize. The work doesn't stop just because you graduate, right? The work continues, and there are other students that will benefit from those changes. But we need you to be part of that conversation now so that it can get better. And yes, it's incremental. It's going to take some time, but if we do it right, if we focus on the process and we do it right, then it has a better chance of surviving any other thing that could come away, whether it's a person leaving the institution, whether it's someone decides like, oh, that's not a resource that we want to put funding into. I think it has a better chance to stick to it. So sometimes we have to explain those hard things as well, and it's part of our job. It isn't just to say, well, it's just going to take time. That's not okay in explanation. I think we need to share with students and be transparent. This is why it takes time. This is why it's going to work if we do it this way. And so help us make sure that the process is really good so that the change is long lasting.
Thank you. I'm gonna pop over to Marcos. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this question.
I think you really have to focus on being transparent about it with the students as well, and show them progress, bring them into the process of doing things. They want to be there. I've seen far too many times, upper administrators make false promises or say the right things to students in those moments, and nothing ever happens. I think of it as like remodeling a home. Some things are easy fixes, and some things can happen right away, and you can see, oh, look, this is what we did. And other things, foundation or whatever it may be, just takes more time. And I go back to, again, the sustainable things. Sustainable things take process and take time. You don't want to build something that's going to be gone after you graduate. You want your legacy to be lasting. And so I think if you explain the process, but you're also transparent and you show the work that's being done, I think that builds trust, one, about what you're doing, because if you don't communicate about anything, then the assumption is you're not doing anything. And so you have to be great communicators. You have to be transparent, bring them into the fold of what you're doing, show them, helping them understand sometimes the political hierarchy of higher education and getting things done can be challenging. And students just don't see that. And students sometimes don't comprehend that. And so bring them in, bring in your leaders and show them, because sometimes a student voice can be amplified much louder than maybe something you were advocating for. And so that can be a really big beneficial thing.
Excellent. Thank you. And Sunny, I'm going to pop over to you to continue with this question.
One of the things I've learned a lot from Berkeley student organizers and activists, but one thing that I've noticed that they do is they utilize MOUs, and so documenting their work. And so An example is our students who have been working on recruitment and retention, who do work on recruitment and retention. 4 years ago, they held a multi-day sit-in of our student union and student store. So all the students have changed. In fact, all the administrators have changed. I wasn't even in the office back then. But it's like as if the protest happened yesterday in terms of the way that it lives on, in terms of this generation of student minds and the way that we're engaged. And it goes both ways. And so it's as administrators and staff showing up to each meeting with respect and authenticity and trust that even though we weren't there 4 years ago, we're honoring the conditions of this MOU, of this document. And so that's something in terms of Berkeley culture they utilize a lot. And I think it's a good practice in terms of just any agreement that is that serious. And so that is something like, where students put it on the line in terms of a student protest with students getting arrested and whatnot, but it was all not for naught, right? So, that's something that I think is a good practice just in terms of just having this agreement with students so that it doesn't just become an urban legend, 5-10 years. But I think just going through that developmental process of why things, and also going through the organizational structure of higher education, of the bureaucracy, and who all, people often think, well, you must make all the decisions. Well, the chancellor must make all the decisions, the UCOP president, and that, none of that's true. Power does not reside in one body. And so explaining that, I think I see that as part of my role.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sunny. I love the idea of the MOUs. I think that's a great way of documentation and passing on the history. And Marissa, you're up.
I don't really have much to share in addition to what my colleagues have said. I think all of that is exactly what we have to consider in this. But I would just add that, many of us come from communities where, we recognize and we honor the fact that our elders hold the knowledge. And so I think for me, as an undergraduate student and graduate student, I was always eager to want to connect with the alumni. I wanted to know what was their experience. I wanted to ask them, what did they navigate? How have things changed? And so whether it be I'm working on a set of demands, what did your demands look like when you were in the program? Or, hey, can you come and talk to our student organization about your experience doing whatever this work was during this time or in this organization. So I think, right now I'm at an institution where alumni engagement is really, strong. And it's actually probably the first time I've been at an institution where it's this strong. And I see that there's a lot of power in that because students are able to see the transition through that history, through that oral history in ways that at a lot of institutions, they don't have access. So I would just say that as much as possible, remember that people, feel connected to the institution. I love when students from UC Irvine reach out to me and ask me, what was your experience like when you were co-chair of BSU? How have things changed? When did you develop this? And I love when I see the impact, when I see that a new position or a program or a tradition that we started still exists. I'm honored that they would reach out to me. So I think that there's a lot of history that sometimes goes untapped because we forget that people existed right before you got there. And I think that helps to encourage people to see the incremental change really does have a large impact.
We have such an incredible panel here this afternoon. I'm just really enjoying hearing all of your perspectives on all of this, on all of the conversations we're having. We have another excellent question from our participants. So how does your JEDI approach differ when it comes to engagement of graduate students, as they tend to be in spaces mentally and as they tend to be in different spaces mentally and physically with their priorities when it comes to campus engagement and career preparedness? And I'm going to ask that you unmute yourself to answer this because I don't know that all of you have worked with graduate students. So go ahead and jump in.
I think it depends. I'm assuming if the question is about, for example, master's and higher education students, it's definitely a little bit differently. I think I will say I have different expectations working with students who are in graduate preparation programs for student affairs, because it's also an opportunity to help the graduate students think about, okay, you were sometimes, most of us were in the role of being an undergraduate student activist. You are now, right, in this position where you are starting to think about working for a university, and more than likely, if you have an assistantship, you work for the host institution, right? And so it might be that you are put in those places where you feel like, oh, I really support the students, but I know I work for the university, so I can't be out there protesting with the students, right? And so what does that look like? And those are some great developmental conversations with graduate students, but it's still about refocusing on, okay, how do we make that long lasting change? How do we work together? How do you contextualize for the students? And how do you give them agency and not take over, right? Because oftentimes I have seen, and where it doesn't work out, where a graduate student in one of our programs wants to ostensibly take over whatever the students are, whatever the undergraduate students are doing, because they know better, or they're more experienced, or they know how things work at a university. And so it's kind of reframing those conversations for those students. I think students in not a preparation program for higher education, to me, it's still the same. It is being transparent. It is asking them, what are some of the challenges in their program? Oftentimes when I've talked to graduate students and they're complaining about the institution, it's still about, we don't see ourselves in the faculty. My research is not taken seriously, and it's because I'm a person of color, right? And that's going to be very different if it's in biology, if it's in, one of the social sciences. And so it's still very much of that, okay, how do we help you and that group of students that might be feeling that way to have the conversations with, right, your department chair, with your dean, how to work with, your provost to make some of those, changes. And that requires a partnering with student affairs and academic affairs. If it's about climate, I think it's just, to me, it's very similar. As undergraduate students, it's just having those conversations, but that's at least just my experience.
Thank you. Is there someone else who's worked a little bit with graduate students? Marissa, go for it.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think, graduate students, a lot of times, you feel the isolation. You start to see, how the sausage is made and it's really not fun, right? And so I think for me, in both teaching graduate students and, advising and supervising graduate students, there's a delicate balance of sort of the slow reveal of how do I share with you what some of the politics are behind some of the decision making, behind some of the issues that maybe you were hidden from. And rightfully so. You want to, you want undergraduate students to be able to fully enjoy their experience, and you don't, as especially as sort of like a JEDI, oriented practitioner, you don't want to put that weight on undergraduate students. And so I think with graduate students, it's important to sort of strategically bring them in on some of what those issues are. And so I tend to focus a lot on mental health, learning how to think about yourself as you navigate these institutions that can be mentally and emotionally violent to oppressed identities. And I think a lot of times it's really just providing that practical support that we take for granted. So whether it's like, hey, do you have a writing partner? Do you have somebody reading over your stuff? Do you have somebody to talk to whenever you're going through X, Y, and Z? I want to make sure that you're connected. I want to make sure that you have that basic stuff that you sort of take for granted as an undergraduate student, because there's so many people that you have access to, so many resources that are targeted directly at you. And when you're a graduate student, that stuff is chopped in more than a half. So I think it's, at least when I reflect on my own experience and when I think about graduate students that I've worked with, oftentimes it's just feeling like no one is there supporting you, like you're sort of drowning and trying to figure out how to make it. And so I like to make sure that you have, an affinity based writing group, that you have an affinity based group that you can talk about some of the emotional labor that you're taking on in your classes, or some of the challenges in supervising up to your supervisor who does not reflect your identity. How do we have those really practical conversations that don't seem like they're JEDI focused, but they really are, because I'm trying to provide you with a toolkit that's going to both protect you and give you the tools to be able to navigate this institution that wasn't made for you. So those are some of the things that I'm thinking about more practically in terms of distinguishing graduate students.
Thank you so much. So as we get closer to the end of our time together, each of you gets 1 minute to answer this final question. My final question for the group is, how do you sustain yourself, and what are your strategies for self-care when doing JEDI work? Marcos, let's get started with you.
Well, I think in general, I sustain myself, especially now, is time away and disconnect from really the world, and time to enjoy the things that I enjoy. I love, weirdly, like reading the news and keeping up with what's happening. But for myself, I have to disconnect from that a lot, I think, in order, because it can be very, very draining to see the different policies or executive orders that may come out and how that affects JEDI work. And also within our work too, as well, we have a lot of folks that have opinions about what we should or shouldn't be doing as it relates to JEDI work, and that can be very draining as well, because you're like, I know I'm doing the right thing. Like, why can't you see like this also as well? But there's a lot of process. So I think taking some of that response with I don't know, with a grain of salt, or just like, I don't really care. Like, sometimes I have to say, I really don't care what you have to say, because I know like this is what we're supposed to be doing, and you have your opinion. That's awesome. And I've had to remind myself to not take things personal sometimes, and just keep going, because my students depend on me, you know, and my staff look up to me to be leading the way. And so if I'm not disconnected, I'm ignoring people and their negative comments, and I don't read Facebook. I've had to leave a few groups as well. I've left my own fraternity international page, because I simply could not stand. I get sucked into reading comments and what people were saying, and it was a weird enjoyment for a little bit, but then it was just like, this is draining me professionally. And so I pick and choose now what I'm deciding to read and what I engage with, and have cared a lot less about differing opinions on what people have begun to say.
Thank you. I agree. I think boundaries are really important. Sunny, how do you take care of yourself?
So I have 2 kids who are in elementary school, are going to school, you know, fully remote. I have a partner, husband, who works outside the home, you know, 3 out of the 5 days of the week. So finding you know, how to care for myself especially during COVID times, has been really, really challenging. And I'm an introvert, so I need spaciousness and quiet and alone time to be able to recharge. And so so whatever I do, you know, trying to find that, even if it's just a few minutes every day, just at the end of the day, just to be by myself and to reflect, whatever that looks like. I'm trying to make active choices around how I want to spend my time, and how is that activity going to make me feel on the other side. So yeah, I can marathon watch like 5 Netflix shows, and accepting that, and sometimes that's going to be okay, but how am I going to feel on the other side of that, right? Whereas like, maybe I can use some of that time to connect with loved ones, and that's going to make that, I know that's going to fill my cup. I talk to a therapist regularly, several times a month. I meditate. I just signed up for an online Zoom class. So, you know, I try not to see self-care as like adding activities, because we don't want to grow our to-do list. Sometimes that feels much more stressful. But, you know, what is it that just being much more in my body? I live in my head. I think many of us who work in academia only live with our head. And so just remembering that I'm a integrated being with my heart, mind, and soul and body, particularly my body, and taking care of that.
Excellent. And Marissa, how do you take care of yourself?
Yeah, I just want to underscore what has already been said around, you know, mental health and boundaries. Absolutely. I would say, in addition to those things, you know, my faith is really important to me. And so I'm really involved in that community. I also think it's important for me to always be grounded in a life outside of student affairs. So my family is my priority. And my, you know, my friends who have nothing to do with my career are another one of my priorities. I make sure that they are always a part of my everyday schedule. And, you know, I think generally, I also like to stay engaged in sort of JEDI work affiliated work outside of student affairs. So, you know, I'm an organizer on a part of an organization that, provides groceries to, families in need and people who have protested and sacrificed a lot for racial justice. And so for me, like, to be able to meet with those organizers every week, to occasionally do grocery runs and really connect with people outside of higher education is like absolutely what makes me feel rejuvenated and makes me remember why it is that I'm doing this work. Because, let's be honest with ourselves. Sometimes we can work in institutions where we feel very taken for granted, where we feel like, we might be working with a people who are extremely privileged, and you're like, why am I doing, where is this energy going towards? And so I think for me to be able to work directly with communities that I know absolutely benefit from my labor is just a good way to feel grounded. And that's really, in addition to what my colleagues have said, really kind of what I try to focus on for self-care.
Excellent. Thank you. And Tanatsan, can you bring us home this afternoon? How do you take care of yourself?
I don't know that I have anything to add to what these wonderful colleagues have already said, but Marissa, you're right. Having outside interest from student affairs and something that really energizes you is so important. Often we don't, right, in our roles get to be the activists on campus. And so I think it's important to have that personal piece where you can do that off campus and connecting in that way. I think for me, same thing. I use the methods of meditation, finding the time to not be plugged in at all connected. I like to just completely disconnect and not check anything at all, and that's really important for me. Spending time with my husband is crucial, and I like to do that. And fortunately, we get to spend a lot of it now since we're stuck at home together. So that has been really good and really helpful, and to do some small projects at home. But it is important, and it will always be a negotiation. I don't think it's a balance of things. I think it's sometimes your work takes precedence. Sometimes taking care of yourself is the most important thing, right? So it will always have to be an adjustment. There isn't a perfect balance, at least not for me.
Awesome. Thank you so much. First of all, I want to say we're only going to go like 2 minutes over time. So right then and there, we all deserve a round of applause. But I do want to give our panelists a round of applause and just a heartfelt thank you for your time and sharing your stories and your experiences and wisdom with all these folks. We're so grateful for all the participants that could join us this afternoon. I hope you all found this as fulfilling as I did. It was amazing to hear all of your experiences and wisdom. I know that I learned a lot this afternoon. And as you all go on to enjoy your evenings, just a reminder, please follow us on social media. You'll find us as NASPA Region 6 on both Facebook and Instagram. That's a great way to stay up to date on all the happenings. And don't forget to register for our virtual Western Regional Conference. It's going to be amazing. And again, it is super affordable. Like, it's really going to be a worthwhile experience. You don't have to wear uncomfortable shoes. You can wear shorts. Like, this is the world's greatest conference in my mind. So with that, thank you all for joining us. Thank you again to our panelists. This was a great experience. Have a lovely evening, folks.
Thank you for facilitating. This was great.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Pia. Thank you, everyone.
This was fun.
Bye.
Bye.